Too often we get accountability confused with conformity, especially in the religious systems. And we talk about this with our friend Sarah, the Appalachian Oracle, in our episode Drop the Stones this week, where we look at this accountability and what it is. And it seems like, on the surface, like a good idea. It's a group of people coming together, holding each other accountable and tight to the law to keep them moving forward in a faithful pattern. And the whole object of the accountability is to make sure that we don't fall short. We don't stray away from the path that God has laid before us, and we stay on it so we can experience righteousness and salvation later in. And we don't have to repent or fall away and, whatever it is, that it's there to guide us. And it seems great and all until you kind of look at it and what it is. It's an outside influence telling us what's right and wrong. It's eliminating what we have inside of ourselves that we hold as our moral compass. And I think that's a big key to it, because when we do it on an individual basis and hold to that morality, it gives us some flexibility within there. So on a kind of a light example, if you believe that speed limits are there and they're a necessity and they're good, you're going to probably obey the speed limits all the time. But if you have a sick child in your car that you need to get to the hospital because it's a, extreme measure, it's something that needs to be done, you're probably going to go over the speed limit a little bit. And you can justify that because the health and safety of that child is more important than obeying the law that you've put in your mind. But accountability sometimes in the church doesn't allow for that because it's extremely black and white. It's always good. It's always wrong. And just from experience, I know this changes from time to time, church to church and everything else. We had one church that we used to go to, and we were still in contact with the leadership of that church. And we put our kids in Awana at this new church we were going to. And the old church was telling us that was wrong. It was sinful. We're allowing our children to follow in their other people's teachings and not letting ourselves teach our children. And that you were going to let them fall away. And in hindsight, maybe they were correct because we all fell away. But it was the difference between churches. And to be quite honest, that old church we went to ended up conforming their ways and adjusting and letting their kids go to Awana because they saw some sort of benefit in group activity with their children instead of keeping them in an extremely tiny bubble. So there's no consistency through everything, and it's kind of up to the leadership and the system to decide, this is right and this is wrong. And no individual perspective is allowed a lot of times because it's always right or wrong depending on what the system says. And it takes away from the individuality. And I think most importantly is that it's this group think, and it allows people to have this superiority, this elevation of who they are, because it's easy to point out stuff in other people. And when you feel bad about something you may have done, you can find 3 things in someone else to elevate yourself. And that's what happens in these accountability groups a lot of times, is that someone's doing something, but they like to point out the sins in everyone else. Hell, we have teachings on it with the log in your own eye. But that's what comes from these accountability groups, is that people want to point out other people and not recognize what's in themselves. And we're using outside influences to kind of instruct us and influence us on what we really think and deter us from what our true thoughts and ideas are on what is right and wrong in the world. We need to get away from these groups holding us accountable all the time. I mean, they serve a point and a practice at some times, but our individuality and our own individual moral compasses need to be the ultimate decider. And we can settle it later when we do things and try to justify it and see what's going on. But when we do it with the individuality, we tend to be a little more flexible and more apt to learn and grow. The groupthink wants to conform and hold tight to it because the system ends up being more important than what actually is going on.